Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming a wrap-up video, which I haven't done for now 2 months at this point. So it'll be September and October's wrap-up. Before we get on into things, if you want to see what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis, my Twitter and my Instagram are the best place to do that. It's at Kendra Cus. Both of them are great places. I post pretty regularly on both of them. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe if you're new here to see more book and beauty content and travel vlogs. So hit that subscribe button. But if you're keen to see what I have to say about these books, then just keep watching. So, actually, this was like my worst reading of the year so far. I really kind of hit a really bad reading slump at the end of August, like towards the very end of August. I also just hit like a creative slump. Honestly, I haven't been in the best like mental headspace. I really am trying really hard to get out of this little like bout of, I guess, depression. That is the best way to describe it because it is throwing off everything. It's throwing off my writing and my reading, and honestly, like I don't really have a drive to watch like my favorite TV shows anymore, so I'm just really working hard to get out of it. But with all that being said, I did get some reading done, just not a lot. Usually I read 4 to 5 books a month, and this month, or September, it was like 2. And then October, I think it was like, let's see what October was. October was 6, but a lot of it was audiobooks, and I'll explain later. But yeah, let's just get on into it before we gab too much. The first thing I read was The Diviners by Libba Bray. Here's the problem. It's been so long since I've read this book, and I've talked about it in a lot of other videos, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but I gave this 5 stars. I loved this to pieces. I thought this was an incredible book. The setting is my favorite thing, 1920s New York, like everything about that is me. I adored this book. I loved our main character, Evie, and I really, really, really liked the side characters. Honestly, I didn't care too much for Sam, but I loved Jericho, and I loved Will, her uncle, and Theta. Loved Theta. I loved the story of this. I thought the plot was incredible. It really kicked my like spooky season off. It felt like such a perfect read for September, getting into fall and getting into spooky season. And I loved this so much. If you didn't know what The Diviner's about, it's about this girl named Evie who has what we end up calling, like, has a power, and these people that have these powers, we end up calling them diviners. But her power is that she can like hold somebody's item and like receive memories of that person while holding this item. And she's basically a really kind of like a troublemaker, a little bit of a rebel. And she does some things that make her parents send her, well, they don't make, her parents aren't the best parents, it seems like, but her parents send her to New York to live with her uncle Will. And like, who wouldn't want to go to New York City as a 17-year-old? You know what I mean? So kind of a win-win for her. And then she meets all these people along the way. There's these crazy paranormal murders going on in the city, and it is just such a fun ride. I loved every piece of this book, and yeah, loved it so much. That was the first read of September. So the next book I read in September was Serpent and Dove by Shelby Matern. This was our overhyped book club pick for September, and I liked it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. 4.5 stars. And to be honest, I think I still teeter between 4 and a 5. Well, a 4 and a 4.5, honestly, because I really, really, really enjoyed this, but I definitely see the faults in it. Does that make sense? Like, I loved the relationship between Lou and Reed. I should probably get into a little bit of a summary, but I'll do that in a second. I love the relationship between Lou and Reed, but the beginnings of the relationship was a little unbelievable for me, but like, in the end, I put that aside and just enjoyed the book. Basically, what this book is about is there is a girl named Lou, and she's kind of on the run in Paris from things you find out later on in the book, but she is a witch, and Reed, our other main character, is a witch hunter. They're like this like kind of like military style, very heavily religious group of people that they're called the chasseurs. I don't really know how to pronounce it. I don't speak French. I'm not French. So it was a very, very cute relationship because he's kind of like a soft boy, but he's also very like sturdy and rugged and like honorable, but he's also kind of like the soft boy. So I really, really liked the characters. I thought Lou was great too. She was crass. and unapologetically herself, and I really loved that. I thought they were great together. There were some faults. It wasn't my favorite book of all time, but I definitely recommend this. I think this is a 4.5 star for me, which is saying a lot because usually I'm pretty critical, and yeah. The next book I read and ended up doing like 50% audio for this was Layer of Dreams by Libba Bray, which is book 2 in the Diviners trilogy. And listen, I didn't hate this book, but I think I have harsh feelings towards it because I loved the first one so much it became my favorite book of all time. Like the Diviners became a favorite book of all time. In my list of like 20 books or whatever, it's up there. But like, what happened? So basically, this picks up, I want to say like 3 months after the first one, which is very typical for a series. Usually they, jump 2 or 3 months, which isn't my favorite thing, but that's fine. And everything that happened, like all the character progression that happened in the first book kind of got like retracted at the beginning of this book. So I was kind of bummed about that. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you about the story because it'll kind of give away the first one. There was a romance that like fell so flat, and I was really bummed about that. There was a new character who I really, really, really liked. She's Chinese and Irish, and it added a really cool like dynamic and diversity to our plot. I thought I was gonna love this because it's about like dream walking. It's about these people, the diviners that have these dream walking talents. It was so boring. And here's the thing, I think I gave it a 3.5 stars, but I was dead set on giving it a 3 star because it was so boring until the last 15%. The way the plot came together was incredible. I loved it. But I have very harsh feelings towards the first, like 80% of the book or 85% of the book, because I felt like, first of all, I loved Evie so much, and we barely got her in this story. I also don't care at all for Sam, but that's fine. I love Henry, and we get a lot of him in this book. But I just feel like all the elements that made me connect to the first book were not in this book. And that's the biggest bummer, like except for the time period. But it wasn't even as themed as the first book. The first book was so themed in the 1920s. And this one, it was just like so lackluster to me. I probably most likely will continue the rest of the series. Honestly, I do think this deserves a 3 star because in my opinion, a 3 star isn't a bad book. If I go 2 star, that's a bad book. 3 star just means definitely wasn't my favorite, definitely sees some faults, and I didn't love it. And I did 50% of that on audiobook because there was no way I was going to get through it reading it because it's a heifer. It's like 700 pages. And if I do continue on with the series, I'd imagine I'll do it audiobook because of how disappointed I was in the second book. Okay, the next book I read, I do not have it with me. It is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. I actually let my sister borrow it, and I don't have it with me, but I'll obviously put a cover of it up on the screen. You guys, I think this book was what helped me get out of my big slump. Like, I'm still kind of in a reading slump, but not really, but it helped me get out of the horrible slump I had in September because I read this at the beginning of October. I love this. If you did not know, this is about a girl named Celine who comes over from Paris. She's on the run because she accidentally killed, not so accidentally, but accidentally killed her attempted rapist, and she's on the run. So she goes on this boat that takes girls from Europe to this place in New Orleans that is a convent. They go there and work until they find like a husband or something. And that's how they pay off their debt, by living there. They work for the convent, but then the whole goal is to get them married off or to get them in a better situation, and they pay off their debt while they're doing that. So Celine befriends this girl named Pippa. They're great friends. It's the beginning of the story. Things are great. And then she basically meets this girl named Odette, and she knows something's different about this girl. Odette has a very strong presence, and basically, it's a vampire book, okay, you guys? I don't want to say too much because I really want you to read it, and I think me not knowing almost anything about it going into it was brilliant. But there is a love triangle, and it doesn't really present itself till towards the end of the book. However, I hate love triangles, but I think this one was so good, and it's not really happening too much in this book. It will continue on in the rest of the series. The end of the book had a major cliffhanger that just tore out my heart. I cannot, process this. The Bastian is one of my favorite book boyfriends ever now. I'm dying. I loved so many characters in this series. It was so dynamic. I gave it a 5 stars. I loved it. I do understand that there was a couple of faults here and there with the book, but because I connected with it so well, I literally can't not give it 5 stars. You know what I mean? I just loved it so much. And you need to read it. It was so good. And I'm so happy vampires are coming back, but in like a very sophisticated way. Like, this was a historical fiction. It takes place in the late 1800s in New Orleans. It was a beautiful setting. Renee Ahdieh really created this beautiful depiction of New Orleans in the late 1800s and of like the style and the sound and you know, the setting. And she created some beautiful characters, no pun intended. And I cannot wait for this series to continue on. I'm crossing my fingers that I can somehow get an arc of it when the arc is available. Just send out good vibes, give me positivity, and yeah. The next book I started, which isn't particularly the next book I finished, when I read said book from said series, I like to take it really slow so that I'm not rushing through it and I can enjoy it better. It is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is obviously the third book in the Harry Potter series. I'm sure you know that. But this is the illustrated edition, which probably is like one of my new favorite things ever, these illustrated editions. I have to get my hands on the Goblet of Fire, which just came out maybe a month ago at this point, because I obviously am trying to do a reread of all the books. I love this series so much. I really, really loved the Sorcerer's Stone and Philosopher's Stone when I reread it this time around, but it was the beginning of this year. It was like March. And then I read Sorcerer's Stone. I can't remember. I think it was like April. And I liked Sorcerer's Stone, but I also kind of hated it at the same time. I think it's the worst book of the entire trilogy. The plot doesn't make as much sense. And also it just feels so prejudiced against everyone that's not a Gryffindor. And it gets better in this book. Like, you get a little bit more like Ravenclaw action. A little bit, kind of. And Hufflepuff. Because you meet Cho and you meet Cedric, but not really. But obviously still, it's all very prejudiced against Slytherins, which is fine. It just obviously irks me, so I'm Slytherin. Love this book, 5 out of 5 stars. I used to think Goblet of Fire was my favorite book of the series. In this reread, I don't know. We'll have to see when I read Goblet of Fire coming up here shortly if I still think it's my favorite or if this, because this was incredible. Loved it. The next book that also took me a long time to get through was Time of Contempt by, and I don't even know how to say his first name, but Sapkowski. This is obviously in the Witcher series. This is the second book of the series, but technically the fourth, because there are 2 prequel books that are incredible. This was my least favorite read of the series so far. I think I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I don't think it was a bad book. It just felt like nothing happened the whole way through. I ended up doing about 90% on audiobook and read the other 10%. I just think I loved the first 3 books so much, and I was kind of disappointed in this one because it felt really slow. Barely anything was happening. We barely got any bit of Geralt, and it just kind of like felt really stale. I will continue on with the series because I love this world so much. I love these characters, but definitely is going to be a 3 out of 5 stars for me, and definitely so far is going to go down as my least favorite book of the series, but I think it could get better, because I've heard great things about the rest of the series. Honestly, I haven't really heard anybody trash any of these books. I just did not connect with this one in the slightest. It took me literally 5 or 6 weeks to get through an audiobook, which is just so sad. Let's move on. Okay, right after that, I picked up Saga Volume 2. I read Saga Volume 1 back in August. So in October, I read Saga Volume 2. I didn't plan on waiting a month and a half or 2 months to read it, but it's just kind of how, what happened. This was so good. 5 out of 5 stars. I know a lot of people don't rate graphic novels or comic books, but this was incredible. 5 out of 5 stars. I did really, really like Saga Volume 1, but I was like, am I gonna love this series? I don't know. Am I gonna like it? Yeah, but am I gonna love it? Saga Volume 2 is so good. This was incredible. It made me so pumped to get through the rest of the series. I don't know if you know anything about the Saga series, but it is about this guy and a girl, and they're from warring planets. And he ends up being a prisoner in this girl's planet, and she kind of befriends him and then kind of falls in love with him, and then they flee together. So now they're both on the run from her planet, in her planet. They end up getting pregnant and having a child, and it is just so cute. In the first one, you get a lot of their current situation, how they're gonna get out of this, being on the run in this planet that hates them now. And in the second book, you get a lot of actually their backstory as well as what's currently going on. It was chef's kiss, so good. I really want everyone to read this series. It is technically an adult comic book, but it's not like super graphic or anything like that. Obviously, it's like really, there's a lot of blood and war and fighting because it's about warring planets, but it is so good. So good. And the last book I read in October was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This was the Overhyped Book Club pick of the month. Ninth House, if you didn't know, is about a girl named Alex Stern who was the lone survivor of this crazy, like kind of like unsolvable style murder in her hometown, or like in Southern California. And also, she can see greys. They call them greys. They're ghosts. She can actually see ghosts, whereas normal people obviously cannot. So the dean of Yale finds out, and after he finds out she was the lone survivor of this murder, he kind of gives her like, I'm assuming a full ride scholarship to Yale. I can't really remember, but he basically accepts her into Yale to now work for these underground societies to help protect them while they do their rituals, because she can see the greys, and the greys like to they're really attracted to blood and these rituals, so she's there to protect these rituals from the greys. I'm really in between like a 3 and a 3.5 star. I don't think this was a bad book. I just personally didn't connect with it at all. There were 3 characters I loved, and they weren't the main character. Like, one of them was Darlington, but you do get some of his perspective in this book, but as you'll see, not enough and not a lot. And then I really liked Dawes, who you do get a lot, but more towards the last 30% of the book, you do get a lot of her. And then I really, really, really liked Detective Turner, who is not a main character, but he's definitely a very important supporting character. I thought he was going to be just a dick at first, and he was a dick at first, but I kind of like really kind of loved that, because he wasn't down to take anyone's BS. Like, he was just like, I mean, he's older than them, he's a detective, and he knows that these shady things are going on at this college, and he's there to just like kind of like keep things under control, but he doesn't really know what's going on, but he knows things are going on. Anyways, I thought the dynamic between him and our main character, Alex, was so fun. One of the reasons I didn't love this book was there was hardly any dialogue, and I know that sounds like kind of naive to say, or that I prefer naive books, which I don't. I love beautiful descriptions. I love lengthy, like gorgeous prose that really sets up this gorgeous setting. However, one of Leigh Bardugo's strengths, in my opinion, is dialogue, and there was little to none in this book. Like, it was one sentence and then like 4 paragraphs, like 4 huge paragraphs of descriptions, and it just made it really hard to connect to the story. I think Leigh Bardugo focused on creating the scene and world building and plot development, and did not give us enough of character motivations or character development or character relations. I love both. I love a healthy mix of both plot, world building, and character development, but what I really latch on to most, the way I connect with books, and everyone's different, I connect with books more so when I connect with a character, and it makes it really hard to connect with a character when there's not a lot of character development or character motivation described. Obviously, we do learn a lot about Alex's story, but it takes the entire book to get the full picture of it, which makes a lot of sense because Leigh Bardugo did the same thing with Kaz Brekker in Six of Crows, but we got so much character relation and character development in Six of Crows that it didn't matter. And in this book, it did matter. I don't know if that makes sense. Did I like it? Yes. Will I continue on with the series? I want to say yes. Like, I really do see myself, because I want to know what's going to continue on. This leaves off on a huge cliffhanger, and I want to know what happens. I'm bummed, if that makes sense. But I do think it was a good book. I'm not too bummed. I think I just had really high expectations, and then it started getting not great reviews, and I was like, oh crap, am I not going to like it? And then I went into it with just like the most mild headspace I possibly could, and I still did not love it, which is fine. I think my friends at the Overhyped Book Club loved it, but I didn't not love it. I think it was a good book, just not my favorite. Okay guys, so that is the 9 books I read this month. Well, books / audiobooks / 1 comic book that I read this month. Well, the last 2 months. I enjoyed a lot of these books. I had a great time reading these. I'm really kind of getting out of that bad mental health space, and I'm getting out of my little reading slump / creative slump, and I'm being happier, and I'm really enjoying what I read, and I'm really excited to continue on. I've got a lot of good things that I want to read this November, and hopefully I can get to all of them. But with that being said, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a great morning, noon, evening, day, night, whenever it happens to be that you're watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.